Howdy. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Thank you so much for once again tuning in to Strong Bodies by Tish podcast. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a period of my training career that really made the biggest impact in the way I look at life and the way I approach training my clients. Again, I've been doing training for 30 years, so obviously there's some significant moments in my career that have really made a huge impact. And the one that I want to talk about today is, it actually didn't happen that long ago. It happened when I was in Calgary. Obviously, I only have lived in Kelowna since November. It is only October, Tish. And I would say it probably was about 7, maybe 8 years ago. I was training Eva, and I'm going to get back to Eva at the end of this podcast. She is probably by far the most important client and probably one of the more important people that I ever met in my life so far. And I do want to talk about her and leave a good amount of time to maybe explain why she impacted my life so much. But there was a period of my time where I really, for some crazy reason, started training the elderly. And we're talking, not 50, not 60. We're talking people in their 70s. I think what happens is if you take one type of client on and you do a good job and they're happy, they tell their friends, and then that sort of just grows. So in my case, I had a couple of elderly clients in their 70s and 80s that were doing incredibly well. And before you know it, I was training approximately 10 of them each week. I loved it. Neil would say to me, "Why are you training so many old people?" And there was a couple of reasons. Reason number one was that they were very consistent with their training. There wasn't a lot going on with them. All retired, children are not there, and so their training and the sessions that they had booked and scheduled with me were a priority and very important. So they were very consistent. We were regular, and so that is the key. A lot of times people get very busy, and the first thing that kind of goes to the side is training. But for some reason, the elderly people really love and embrace those sessions, probably because it's a little bit more lonely time of their life, and me showing up at their house is a nice little visit. And that's what I was doing at this time. I was a trainer at Talisman Center for, 10, 11, 12 years. And then when I moved to Europe, I took a year off. Obviously, when I came back, I really realized that I wanted to get back into training. I had done a little bit of training in Switzerland, but I had the bug. I was ready to get back. It was actually probably the best thing that I could have done for my career is take a year off and reevaluate where I was going with that career. And I, although I love the Talisman Center, now Repsol Center, I knew that I needed a change. I knew that I needed to figure out how to make more money. When you're using a facility like the Talisman Center, they take a lot of your hourly income. Obviously, it's a beautiful space. It's fantastic. So when I came back, I really wanted to get back into training, but I wanted to see if I could work less, make a little more money. Don't we all? So I thought about the mobile business because obviously overhead is next to nothing. And I was well into my career then. So I was very comfortable with being creative with very little equipment. I didn't, my philosophies on using the big pieces of equipment were, not that important anyways. So being creative and using minimal equipment was something that I was encouraging my clients to do anyways. It's more functional. Using the body whenever you can is always better. So I knew that I could easily train people in small spaces with very little equipment. The only thing is I needed to convince people that I could help them in their home. And that's how the second half of my career was really mobile business. I did do the last few years in another private studio, but for the second decade of my training, I drove around and trained clients in their homes. Now, I just picked a small space in the city. I wasn't driving all over. And it did take some time. Basically, I just reached out to all of the clients that I had trained prior to leaving to go to Switzerland and said, hey, this is my new gig. I'm back. I want to see if you'd be back or interested in me training you. Give me a couple free sessions to show you what I can do. Most of them said, I have no space. I have no equipment. I told them not to worry about that. I had that covered, which I did. So I would basically show up at people's homes and bring my ball, sometimes I'd even lug my Bosu in there, which was very cumbersome, couple bands. And the rest was just being very, very, very creative. And before you knew it, I was training 4 or 5 people a day, got super, super busy very, very quickly. And in the end, I probably wasn't working less, but certainly was, my income was improving, which was great. The driving did get a little cumbersome at times with the traffic and the construction in the summer and the snow in the winter. But all in all, it was awesome. I got to see where people lived. I was in some beautiful homes. I mean, some of the most beautiful homes in Calgary. I had the opportunity to see some people actually did have fully equipped gyms, but back then it wasn't as popular as it clearly is now, obviously. And so the period of me training the elderly a couple years into my mobile business just picked up. Specifically for them, they're going to love that, right? I just drive up, show up to their house, do their little training session, and before you know it, we've done a really good workout with a nice stretch. They've had a nice visit. I feel great about me having an opportunity to help them. And it was a fantastic time of my career. Sorry, I have a hair in my face, so I have to kind of get out, otherwise it's going to drive me nuts. Okay, there we go. So before you knew it, I was training about 10, mostly women in their 60s, 70s, and some even in their 80s. And it was very rewarding, but it was also probably one of the more challenging periods of my career, just because it was difficult sometimes watching what your life can be like if you haven't taken the right measures and picked and chose the right habits or choose the right habits in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. I saw firsthand the differences. I had clients in their 80s that were still literally running stairs with me. And I am not exaggerating. I have 2 people in mind, and I remember thinking, this is going to be me when I'm 80. And then I had other clients even that were not even approaching 80, more in their 70s, that were basically bedridden. And the direct difference or correlation between those who were living an incredible active life versus the ones that were really struggling. We're talking, some of them had walkers, some of them had people coming in to help them bathe, etc., was what they did in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I tell you, it was a huge eye-opening experience for me, because I saw how hard it was and how limiting and how dependent some of these people had become on people and family members. Of course, family members don't mind being there for their parents, as, you know, I'm going to be for mine and Neil's parents. But there is a sense of pride that comes along with getting older and still being able to function, and not just function, but actually live a rewarding, active, happy life. And that involves being able to move your body without pain. And of course, even the people who took care of themselves earlier on in their life had aches and pains. At 70, 80, you're going to definitely feel aches and pains. But the differences were astonishing. So much so that I had a struggle. I was struggling. After a couple of years of training some of these people, I would get in my car and almost feel a sense of depression. I just felt terrible for the way some of these people lived. And as much as I would try to, have them sit at the end of their bed, and I'd give them their TheraBands, and we do the rolls, and then of course I would pop them on the bed, because there's no way we could go on the floor. There's no way they'd be able to get off the floor. And we just put them through a nice stretch. I was completely open. I said, it's unfortunate that we're starting this at 75, 80 years old. I'm going to help you the best I can. And I didn't want them to feel guilty about not making healthier choices, but obviously it's too late for them. But I wanted to also make sure that they knew that I was not a miracle worker, and that it really was more a session of just being there for someone for that hour. And it kind of bothered me. I'm showing up in their homes. It's not exactly inexpensive, and I just felt like it wasn't worth the investment for them. They were almost, I hate to say this, too far gone. And that is, I've never actually sat there and thought about that, but really I think that was what was causing me the biggest anguish over training some of these people. I just felt like I wasn't going to be able to help them, and it just simply wasn't fair for me to continue to show up and take their money. If I wanted to go there and be their friend, that's something that I obviously would do without charging them. So I actually took a very big step back after a few years of training them for that reason, but also just I found it quite difficult to day in and day out see how some of these people lived. And it actually stressed me out to think that that was going to be the way my life might be. But then, of course, I trained a couple of others that were literally challenging myself up the stairs. So I knew, of course, that I could make some better choices and continue to stay on the path that I was, and obviously help the possibility or the outcomes of me having a better life in my 70s and 80s. So those few years of training 10, maybe 11 people in their 70s and 80s really changed my really changed my outlook and approach on how I trained people. I spoke a little bit on the first episode on how I transitioned and really changed the type of person that I would be open to training just through my experiences itself. And the biggest impact, though, was training the elderly. I no longer wanted people who only cared about extrinsic results. I just didn't have the patience for it anymore. And so I would basically listen to what they wanted, what their goals were. And if they said things like, I want to be able to move my body with less pain and continue with the activities that I love when I get older, I would embrace to train them. And of course, we all want to look better. Even some of those 70-year-olds were still, wanting to look better. I mean, we all have a little bit of that in us, I'd like to believe anyways. But that type of client was literally the only type of client that I would train, because those are the people that understand what clearly is going to happen if you don't take care of yourself ASAP. So there's going to be some people on this podcast that are listening or watching and are in their 20s and 30s and probably maybe are active or probably know they should be doing more. And they'll probably think, oh gosh, I cannot even begin to think that what I'm doing now is going to predict or is going to be my outcome when I'm 70 or even 80. I know it's hard to believe, but believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, if some men might listen, it happens fast. It happens way faster than you realize. I still sit here today and cannot believe that I am 47 years old. When I tell my mom and remind her that she has a 47-year-old daughter, she's just like, how the heck did that happen? So it happens fast. And in your 20s and 30s and often in your 40s and 50s, I shouldn't generalize, but I tend to. But when we're younger, we do focus more on the extrinsic, the things that you see. And we don't focus and we don't realize how important or what's going on in the inside. And I have to say, I am so glad that I found fitness and wellness in my early 20s. I went to the gym when I was 20 because I liked boys and I liked to see the boys. And I knew that if I went certain times of the day, there was certain boys that would be there. And even if they didn't talk to me, that really was the only reason that I went. And plus, of course, the energy of the people, the positivity, the humidity of the Repsol Center in the dry, cold bitterness of Calgary. There was a few reasons, but really it was the boys, if I'm completely honest. And I was consistent because of that. And before you know it, I would look in the mirror and go, oh, wow, my body is kind of changing a little bit. But after a few years of being pretty consistent, I actually looked in the mirror and noticed that my body was changing. And so my focus was never about how I looked, believe it or not. My parents always had me in sports, athletics, and being healthy was just something that I just was brought up knowing. Of course, if we wanted junk food in the house, it was never not allowed. It was never forbidden. It just was there if I wanted it. And I think that that's also important as children. You don't want to deprive them. Otherwise they become obsessive, just like adults do. If they feel like they can't have something, they want it more. It's just human nature. So I lived a very healthy upbringing of, parents who were into fitness, but didn't focus too much on the exterior. So I had a good mindset going into that whole gym experience. And then I just kept going because of of course, through the 30 years of me training, I've taken some time off. I've had surgeries, busy, all that. But consistency over the last 30 years has been something that I've been very, very good at. And I'm so glad, honestly, I'm so glad that I was, because now at 47, and by the way, it's never too late. Just because I started when I was in my 20s does not mean that if you're listening and you're in your 40s, you can't start. And you still can make incredible improvements in your overall health. You can move your body better, and you can deal with less pain if you strengthen your body at any age. It's just a little harder, I'm not going to lie. But I am thankful and grateful now at my age, creeping up to 50. What the fuck? How did that happen? That I feel and look, I literally feel like every year I'm getting younger. I do every year because I do know I'm getting older. Pick it up a notch. Now I'm incorporating some ice cold bathing. I'm definitely taking my health and wellness to the next level each and every year. But as long as I continue to feel the way I do, I know I'm being rewarded for it. I'm going to continue to do that. But it is never too late. I want to make sure that I make that very, very clear to the people who are listening. So that basically was a huge eye-opener for me. And when I saw, I'll tell this one more quick story and then I'll get to Eva. I was going to my favorite lunch spot in Calgary a couple of years ago. And it is beside the gym or close to the gym that I worked out at. And I typically would do my workout and then I would go down and have my lunch or walk to the place where I would have my lunch. And in the summer, sometimes I would be wearing a tank top or, a top which would show my arms. And of course, I have a little more muscle than the average person, being as consistent and as old as I am. And the women and the girls, I should say, I never know, what do I call them, women or girls? Girls sounds young, women sounds old. Maybe they were in like their late 30s. And they were talking about my muscle and how inspiring it was. And they were, really quite impressed. And also I must have done like an arm workout. So my body was full of blood and I was pumped up. And I said, and I noticed both of them were carrying quite a lot of extra fat around their belly. Who cares if you have fat in your hips and thighs and your bum? That's not what's going to give you the heart issues. So it was big, significant amounts of fat around that waist. And that to me is a big concern at that young age. And I said, you ladies really need to get into the gym. It doesn't need to be a big commitment. I offered to help. They said, oh gosh, and I did say, you will regret not taking care of yourself now when you get old like me. And I was just, I always say old like me because I surround myself with younger people. I don't know why, probably because they keep me young, and probably because I'm so incredibly immature that I would never be able to hang out with someone my own age because they would think I'm an idiot. But I'm always joking around at how old I am because of my peers are typically quite a bit younger than me. And they laughed and they just thought, oh gosh, they said to me, we have so much time. We're so young. Don't worry about it. And I shook it off. It was, my time to not work, not preach. I was off duty at this time. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I thought I would contribute a little bit, but I also don't want to be that trainer that's always lecturing people. They're not quite ready to get into that mindset yet. So anyway, went and ate my lunch, and I thought to myself, I was a bit sad, but, I can't remind or I can't encourage everyone, and it does have to come. Motivation has to come first from within. And what keeps you going, obviously, is the action, and through the actions, you get the results. And so, motivation really, it does have to start with that person. So little stories like that. I think that's, if you are listening and you are young, and you haven't quite figured out what wellness and what health means and what that looks like for you, take some time, hire someone to kind of get you started. It doesn't have to be a huge investment, but you do need someone to sit you down, discuss goals, make sure you set timelines, make sure they're very realistic, and then just start, even if it's a few times a week. And I'm talking strength training mostly for women. We love the sweat, we love the spin, we love the big boxing, we love all of that, and I love it too. But the strength training component of your routine needs to happen. And like I said, it doesn't have to be every day. I encourage 3 times a week for about 45 minutes. That's all my clients do, and that's all I do. So there's a huge room for all the activities that you love in a workout week. So I'm just going to quickly finish this podcast about how my philosophies changed and what impacted them. And I want to talk about Eva. Eva is now no longer with us. We lost Eva a few years ago. Sorry. I told myself I wasn't going to get emotional. She was an incredible woman. She reached out to me at 69 years old. Sorry. Deep breath, Tish. And she needed a hip replacement. She had polio as a child. I think she was the first living child in northern Alberta that was diagnosed with polio. When she went to the hospital, she actually stayed in the hospital for over a year because they did not know what was wrong with her. She was then diagnosed with polio, spent over 6 months getting healthier. And she was a nurse. She was obviously completely got healthy. This was obviously before vaccines were around. And what happens with polio, even though you live a normal adult life, it does come back and haunt you. And unfortunately, it did come back in a negative way physically for Eva. She lost most ability to use one leg, and mostly it was because of a hip injury that she had sustained. She had lived a very active life. She had skied, she had hiked, she was a full-time nurse, she walked to and from work, she worked out every single day. She did what she needed to do to enjoy her life, because as a nurse she had more information about polio and knew that if she had not taken care of herself, she would definitely be reaping more of the, what is the word I'm looking for? She would be she would be suffering more than if she didn't. And so she called me at 69 years old. So this was many, many years ago. So she reached out to me and her little cute little old voice and said to me, "You train one of my friends and she said that you could help me. I need a hip replacement. The surgeon that wants to do the surgery on my hip has told me that I'm not strong enough to go through the surgery and to hire a trainer that had some experience and had some education and see if they can strengthen that hip enough so that they can go ahead and actually, do the surgery. So I was very comfortable helping her. I knew what we needed to do. I agreed to go to her home and meet with her. And I brought my T-Rex. She lived in a tiny, tiny, tiny little apartment in downtown Calgary. I basically tied the T-Rex over her door. She was in her hallway, and I stood in her bathroom and coached her through the workout. That literally was all. And we did the same workout 3 times a week for a half an hour, just because it was a very small space, cramped. And she was 69. She had very little strength going on, but we were able to use the T-Rex as assistance rather than making the exercises more difficult. And I also then met her at the pool, and I gave her a couple of exercises that she needed to do in the pool on the off days that I wasn't there. So we got started. 6 months of very consistent Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 30 minutes with me. And then Tuesday, Thursday, she would get her body into the water and do the deep water workout. And we did that very consistently for 6 months. She acknowledged throughout the 6 months that her pain was already going away. She was not taking her pain meds as regularly, and I thought that was great. And then she went to the doctor, her surgeon, to see if she was going to be able to get into the surgery. And she said to me, Tish, I don't even feel that hip like I used to. And I just, clients sometimes say things or believe things. I'm not sure. I just didn't believe really what she was saying, to be completely honest with you. But we had been pretty consistent. So she went into the surgeon's office, and I told her when she was finished with her appointment to give me a call. And obviously after 6 months, I was very interested and I cared, and we just connected. We just absolutely connected. We laughed together. She gave me a ton of relationship advice. We talked a lot about sex. We just had the best time. She was just absolutely incredible. I actually offered to train her pro bono, but she insisted that she pay me, which was a frustration for me because she was so stubborn, but she said she wanted to. So anyways, I really literally would have trained her 3 times a week for the rest of my life for free. She filled my bucket so incredibly much, and I miss her. So anyway, 6 months later, she no longer needed that hip replacement. We literally had got her to the point where that hip had gained enough strength. The bone had increased in density significantly at 69 years old. 6 months, 3 times a week for 30 minutes at 69 years old. When she called me, I thought she was lying. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She never once after that appointment took another pain medication until the day she passed away. I literally would sometimes show up at her house and say, I have cramps. Do you have any Advil? She literally had nothing in her house in terms of pain meds. Nothing. She was an incredible woman, and I was so incredibly proud of her. And it was the strength training that got her there. And that is why I feel so passionately about getting strong and making sure that you are doing what you can to make sure that your life, as you get older, I know if you're listening and in your 20s and 30s, you're thinking, I am way too young to be thinking about that. But I can tell you as a 47-year-old woman, I don't know. I have no idea how I got there. And I started when I was in my 20s, and I am so incredibly thankful that I did. And remember, I wasn't consistent for the last 30 years. There was lots of time that I needed to take time off. And I also just wanted to remind you that even if you are listening and you are a little bit older and you're just thinking about getting started, it is absolutely never, ever, ever too late. you absolutely can make changes. As long as you don't hire me at 80 and you're in a walker, we can basically do pretty much anything, as Eva has or was able to show me. It's a huge learning experience for me. It gave me such incredible excitement to know that we could literally change someone's body at 69 through just a little bit of consistency and a little bit of strength training. It was absolutely incredible. I lost Eva a long time actually. Gosh, it's probably been 4 years now. I still get that emotional over her. You know, when you meet people that leave that kind of imprint on your soul and your heart, I think it always, when you sit and think about it, you always maybe get emotional. She was my second grandma, and she eventually died of cancer, but fought strongly, and she did great. And she lived from 69 to 80 years old with that hip, pain-free, and literally did stairs with me up until she was about 79 3/4. When the cancer came, it came fast, and she didn't have much of a fight left. So I actually think it's a blessing. Okay, well, that is episode number 2. I'm sorry that I got so emotional. I'm not that emotional of a person, but like I said, Eva touched me more than I think I realized at times. I was so proud of her, and she was just someone who really filled my bucket. So enjoy the rest of your day. Can't wait for the next episode. Until then, enjoy your day or evening, and we will see you very, very soon.